to episode 43 of the Bithell Games Podcast, our Game of the Year episode. I'm Alexander Slawinski, and
I'm a sock puppet named Mike Bithell.
And Mike can't join us today. After numerous attempts, things from a technical standpoint just went wrong, and we have other folks on the show this week, so it kind of just didn't work out. So it's kind of a weird one, and we're just going to have to roll with it. So welcome to the Bithell Games Podcast without Mike Bithell. I hope you like it, because it's going to go for, dozens of more minutes.
We're going to do it live. Just do it live.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we're playing and/or making games or having technical problems. Show notes. Thanks to all of you out there for listening to the show, picking up our games, buying our books, supporting us through reviews, and positive vibes on social media. We'll be back next year with a new season. All of us.
Maybe a new mic. And, we can rebuild him, make him better, faster. More mic'd up.
We may need to talk about getting some upgrades for this show. We'll figure that out. Maybe that's what it'll be. Season 3 will be the season of upgrades, because we can't do it like this anymore.
I'm finally gonna buy that Yeti.
You're not gonna have your little what is that little boom mic?
My Lucid Sounds.
Yeah,
that I use for recording and every other time.
I haven't even introduced you guys yet. I'm so everything's so off right now. Anyway, joining us on today's show are Mike Futter, author of the GAMEDEV Business Handbook.
Hey, how's it going? Happy
and
Hanukkah.
The fabulously talented Nic Tringali.
Hi, it's me, the clone of Nic Tringali. Every time we've started this podcast, clone.
It's that thing.
Yeah.
So Nic Tringali is our coder, artist, everything. He's our everything. You're our everything.
Yes, yeah.
Complete me. You are everything.
I'm sorry, we
actually, do you think Nick?
Jackson singing?
Well, do you think, Nick, that every single time you restarted the show, it's like that theory in Star Trek that every single time they get transported, the person actually dies and then is...
Yes.
That theory has always screwed me way the heck up, by the way.
Once you dig... There's like a surface level of Star Trek, and then you dig one level deeper, and it's like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then once you go further, it's extremely dark and kind of horrific. I love Star Trek, but yeah, the implication that you just die every time.
Which I believe is whether or not it was direct inspiration for the Swapper, a game I absolutely loved, or if it's just an interesting, line connecting those two. I've always loved that theory.
And then they make fun of the only person who doesn't like using the transporter, Lieutenant Barclay, and they're just like, shut up and do it.
Who, Mad Dog
peer
Murdoch?
Pressure. What?
He played Murdoch in the A-Team, didn't he?
I've never seen the A-Team. Do you know how old I am?
All right, first of all, I need to totally confirm that I'm thinking of the right character.
Or is he the guy who played Max Headroom? There you go. I always got those two guys confused.
Oh, that's Matthew Frewer played... no, it's Dwight Schultz played Barclay. He played Murdoch in the A-Team.
And there we go. The Games of the Year episode. Welcome, everyone. There is no particular order to this, so we will not be going 1 through 10 from the best to the worst or the worst to the best. We are just going to throw out games that we really like this year and why we like them. And that's pretty much it. It's a fireside chat. That's what it is. Oh. So to kick things off, as he pointed out, he is our darling baby on the cast. Nick, go ahead and kick off one of your games from the Games of the Year 2017.
I will start off throwing out Zelda Breath of the Wild, which I know, Alexander, you don't like, if I remember correctly, or you just
I don't know.
Taken with it.
Let me have a Bithell to back you up here, so you're gonna hear from two of us on this one.
Oh, you're with me on this one?
I am, and
yay!
I have thoughts on this though. This
okay, go ahead, Nick.
For a weird reason.
So to be clear, this is not at the top of my list. Even though these are unordered, if it was ordered, this wouldn't be at the top. But it is a good I don't know how to describe it, because I don't want to say like I want to use something besides the word systemic, because that's a cop out, but it has like an interesting set of rules, and more importantly, a designed world that is unrealistic and weird, but is always has like a little something interesting going on that I think is worth talking about. And for me, it's also my game of the year because I played it during an extremely stressful part of the year for me, when I was finalizing a release on 2 separate games at once. So I would basically retreat to my Zelda land where I could relax and my anxiety would subside for a little bit.
How did your anxiety do with having to pick up a new weapon like every 3 swings?
I am like overflowing with weapons. I like at some point you just get so many that like I at some point will start like trading out, like, well, I have these 2 like 32 level swords. I guess I don't want this one, because I have basically always had a full weapon inventory no matter what. So it was never, I mean, don't get me wrong, that does suck in the beginning of the game, because you're like, oh, I guess I'm using this skeleton arm that sucks shit, because
and then it's gone in 2 swings.
Right, for sure. But, and I'm not going to necessarily defend that either, but it turned out to not be an issue for me. And once you get to like once you get out of like the first quarter of the game, so to speak, yeah, it was fine.
But the first quarter of the game could be 20 plus hours.
True.
So here's my workaround.
Yeah.
So my big problem with the game was the same thing. It's like, build up enough weapons, and then you run into a situation where like, all right, I've got a few good weapons, and then they all break, and it's like, what do I do? Amiibo. Honestly, like, I know that some people consider it cheating, but I am, if it's the choice between me putting the game down and me getting just a handful of weapons that I can use until another stash, until I come upon them.
Wait, so what is the strategy? You just take one of your amiibos and stick it on the thing and it gives you something?
It drops a chest, like depending on which amiibo, and like there's weapons in there, there's crafting supplies in there.
How often can you do that?
You can do it like once a day for every amiibo that you have that's compatible. So you can fill up your weapons like once a day with amiibo, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, all right, so now I can just keep playing the game, because in some ways it made me feel like, oh,
Nick, we will seize the means of production.
I'm gonna get destroyed for this. But in some ways it felt like playing a free-to-play game. It's like, well, I've got to wait now. I got to divert myself from doing the thing that I wanted to do to go around and hunt for weapons. Or you can pay $9.99 and get yourself a chest right now.
How is it in less than 10 minutes? We've already come face to face with late stage capitalism.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
well, I don't own any amiibo, so I did somehow manage to play it and enjoy it without amiibo.
And I think there's a certain amount of
patience. And you worked harder for it, right? Yeah. The sweat of your brow.
Yeah, huh?
And I think, and I love amiibo. I have all of this. I think I have every Zelda amiibo except the one, I think it's the Skyward Sword amiibo that was an Amazon exclusive that does the same thing as the Smash Zelda amiibo. I think that's the only one I don't have. But I have literally every Zelda amiibo at this point. And
Futter is just like spread eagle on the ground, drowned in amiibos, holding the Switch, and as soon as he needs one, he just reaches out and just whatever ends up in his hand, just slaps it against the Switch, and chests rain from the sky in Zelda.
I shared that video with you privately, and
I'm sorry.
Thank you not to do an audio description because that infringes on my rights.
After you send me the
I was going to sell that as an audio described video of me.
So, Futter, go ahead. One from your list.
Miitopia. A game that I think does not get enough love because people either love or hate the Miis. So, Miitopia is a turn-based RPG on the 3DS. You create your own characters, like you use your Miis, whether they were from your 3DS or from your Wii or from whatever the first Nintendo. I can't remember what game it was. The one where their first mobile game that they released, which I have.
I have no idea. Miiverse.
I knew this existed.
No, it's
the one before Pokemon Go.
The one before Pokemon Go, which was I can't.
Egress.
Oh, here it is. Miitomo. You can through QR codes, you can like bring all those Mii's in, and what you do at the beginning is you like create the name of the villain, like, and you create the villain. I created my big bad in the game to look like a certain not nice person who is in the news a lot. So that's my big bad in the game, and like I'm in the game, and all my family members are in the game, and my friends are in the game, and there's a wizard in it, and it's like somebody made a Rick, like from Rick and Morty, like me, so he's my like smart, like super smart wizard guy, and it's a really funny, lighthearted game, and
what
like
platform is this on?
It's on 3DS. It's and it's a great little turn-based RPG. It's super funny. I think that a lot of people missed it because like, oh, it's just like a whole bunch of Mii's, and Mii's are stupid, but this game is just amazingly funny, and every time you load it up, it asks you to like say, which of these Mii's look interesting to you? Which one do you think is the most charismatic? And then you pick them, and then those Mii's might get popped into your game as NPCs. So like I have one of the Royal Guards is RoboCop. So I have a RoboCop and like Peter Griffin from Family Guy. Like it's just the weirdest thing. Like all these Mii's get pulled in and like end up as NPCs in this game, and it's just this, and it ends up looking at this the weirdest mashup of nonsense, and it's funny as heck, and it makes me laugh every time I play it.
So the first game from my list is Horizon Zero Dawn.
Good choice.
It is a good choice. Thank you very much. Robo Dinosaurs. Like what do we call that? Neolithic? What era? Neolithic.
Mechalithic.
Robo.
Mechalithic is a very good suggestion.
Yeah, mechalithic combat. Just the combat design in that game is fantastic. Putting the robo designs aside for 1 second, the combat it takes shoot the glowing portion on the enemy's body to a complete refined level.
So it's better than giant enemy crabs.
Yes, much better. Which are based on historical fact, by the way. So, yeah, that's one for all you old timers out there. But yeah, the Horizon Zero Dawn, and then on top of that, it had a really great story that tied everything together, and I couldn't put it down. I played that. I played when I was trying to put my list together for this year, I realized I played very few games this year. But Horizon Zero Dawn, I definitely remember picking it up and not stopping until I had done as much as I could possibly do. And I didn't even go back for the DLC, but apparently apparently that's pretty good too.
Yeah, it's on sale right now. Actually,
yeah, it's that Horizon Zero Dawn. If you have not played it, that is certainly one for AAA games that push things a little bit more forward this year. That is definitely one of them.
And what a coup for Guerrilla! Just really want to say that, like a huge diversion from Killzone for them. Really showing some breadth and some diversity in their design ability.
Nick, go ahead.
Tacoma, the second Fulbright game following Gone Home. I'm a big sucker for space and sci-fi settings, so I basically knew I was gonna like this. And so if you don't know what it is, so Tacoma is a game where it's in the near-ish future, and you are on a space station investigating what happened to the previous residents of the space station, and there are 6 of them, plus an AI. Something.
There's
like
always an AI.
It's like 5 in an AI or 6 in an AI. But the conceit
AI, robot, or xenomorph.
Yeah,
it's always one of those.
Or all 3, preferably. So the conceit. So Gone Home, it was well known because there was no other people in the game, and you just explored the house. And similarly in Tacoma, you were by yourself. But I think the reason I really liked it is because it is a very good evolution of what Gone Home was. And they have basically, you don't have these audio logs. You have these like weird VR reenactments of the conversations, and so it'll look like people walking around and talking, but the people are very, very like low resolution, and they're just like ghostly shadows, but you can see them like hugging or holding each other or that sort of stuff, and you can scrub back and forth. And what's really cool is a conversation will play out across multiple rooms, and so you like enter a room and it's like, oh, you have a new thing is happening, oh, I'm gonna watch it, and then like, you know, people like end their conversation and walk away, but the playback doesn't end, so you follow one person and they walk into another room and start doing something and so forth. The story is really good. I think it was maybe less impactful than Gone Home was, because I feel like Gone Home's had a like very well paced kind of climax, and Tacoma's maybe not so much, but I think overall it's a much better experience, like a lot like prettier and maybe a bit better designed, from like the UI, and like the conceit of the world really plays into why you're replaying these audio logs. And that's it. I think it's good. I recommend it. It's only a couple hours. Definitely go play it.
Futter?
Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which I assume is probably on another list somewhere. No,
not mine.
I didn't play it.
Wow. Okay. Cool. I figured.
Now, for those who don't know, I'm still trying to understand. Was it a sequel to Heavenly Sword,
was not.
Or was it not?
It was its own game. It tackled mental. Like, one of the things that I really liked about it, although I read an interesting counterpoint to this, I loved how it tackled mental health and schizophrenia. The integration of the Norse mythology, the motion capture and performance capture and voiceover, it's just an amazingly well directed game, with a just utterly captivating story and very cool puzzles, and just really good use of the audio log type storytelling mechanic for kind of additional context, but definitely not necessary.
It did a lot of interesting stuff with audio design.
Oh,
right?
It did amazing stuff because it's binaural audio, and it's really like, it's a little disconcerting. It's a game that I would absolutely recommend you play with headphones. They mentioned that up front. But absolutely worth your time. It's not a terribly long game. The combat is satisfying. It's not super challenging. By the end of the game, you start really getting a feel for the flow of it, as enemies become more challenging. But the set pieces, there's these just huge, gorgeous set pieces throughout this game. I don't want to spoil anything about the story. Obviously, I don't want to spoil anything about the presentation. But the final moments of the game, the climax and then the denouement are just both really, really satisfying. And if you haven't had a chance to play it, I think Ninja Theory really outdid itself. And I've loved their previous work, but really outdid themselves with Hellblade.
Alrighty, and next up from me is Super Mario Odyssey. Yes, see.
On my list
Odyssey.
too.
Yes, see. Is that not on your list, Nick?
No, I'm sorry.
Wow.
Other stuff. It's not that it's bad. It's very good. It was almost on my list for sure.
So Super Mario Odyssey, for anyone who doesn't know, is a Mario game. It is very much a Mario game. It is probably the Marioest Mario game since Mario 64, probably. A lot of people will probably mention Galaxy, which is also a very good Mario game. But
it's a 3D Mario game specifically, like in the lineage of Mario games.
Yeah, but this one definitely took things to another level. The worlds are well crafted. There's just so much random work. There's just so much random stuff in there that happens. The New Donk City stuff alone is just redonkulous.
Nice.
Thanks.
Jim.
Don't tell me to do stuff like that. But no, Super Mario Odyssey is fantastic. even after you finish the game, there is still more game to do. After you're done with that portion of the game, there's still more game.
The real game starts once the story ends. And not to say that like what happens before is like useless, but that's where like the Mario ass platforming challenges get going, for sure.
But yeah, all the characters there, everyone's having fun. It's colorful, it's vibrant, it's so joyful, and this is a weird one. It also just works, which is just a kind of weird concept to have to point at as a cool thing in 2017, but it just works and it's a lot of fun, and I like things that are just working and a lot of fun. Nick.
Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is a board game based off of the game Pandemic.
Get out of here.
It's still a game, and basically, so Pandemic is a game where you cooperatively cure diseases across the world. There are 4 diseases, and they break out in cities, and you fly around and plan how you're going to tackle them. And then separately is the legacy concept of games, which I don't know if that's trademarked or not, but we don't have to get into that. It's so basically like it started with Risk, and there's Pandemic and a few others now, where the game in the entire game comes in a box, and it's set up such that each game changes the state of the previous or the following game. So there's a story that plays out, you put stickers on the board, cards are torn up, you reveal like entire new like bits and rules and stuff, and like all of a sudden you can't do this, or like here's a new thing. And then Pandemic, so it started with Risk, and that's fine, but Risk isn't like
okay, so most people know Risk, so let's roll this one back.
Sure.
Because I've never heard of this concept.
You haven't heard about this before?
It's incredible.
Cool.
No. So I haven't heard about this before. So this is called a
legacy game.
Risk Legacy or Pandemic Legacy.
So you buy the box, right? There's a $60 game, $60 game. And when you're done playing it, if you want to play it again, it's a multi-session game. You have to buy a new one.
You play, so I think like 15. Well, so
Nick, take a moment with Risk, because most people know what a Risk board looks like. So how does that work from game to game?
So let's say you start like the first game of Risk Legacy is like a normal game of Risk. I've only played one Risk Legacy game and not the whole campaign. But for example, if somehow a city were to become destroyed in a game of Risk, there is a sticker that is like, okay, if you destroy a game, you put a sticker on this on the board that is permanent, and then on the following game, that city has some attribute about it that changes it. But then it gets really wild and like, okay, here's a entire new faction that enters the game that you can then play as, or objective cards will be introduced and then torn up and like discarded. I don't know much else about the Risk Legacy to like describe it, but Risk isn't like that great of a game, but Pandemic is an extremely good game. And it's cooperative.
I have used the Australian strategy for over 30 years, sir.
Which is why a game like Risk Legacy would be
proof
good
that it's a good game,
because that strategy. That's right. The thing about legacy games is you're playing over multiple sessions, and when you're playing on the same board, or when you're playing with the same general philosophy of your goal, your win condition. So when you play a game of Risk, your win condition is always the same, right? Your win conditions can change in these games. There's a game that James played before he came down here called Seafall, which is also a legacy game. And the way that game works, apparently, like he didn't tell us stuff because if we ever want to play it, it would spoil it. Like there's a puzzle you have to figure out in order to win the game. Like the players are all trying to figure out like what the actual win conditions are. There's a game called Gloomhaven. It's like $130 game, huge box, like 100 different fantasy missions. And then there's decks that.
Is this what Imperial Assault is?
No, Imperial
or is that something
Assault.
different?
Imperial Assault is not a legacy. It's a campaign, but it's not a legacy game. Legacy games are typically defined by the fact that they're playable typically once, although there are things you can do to replay them, and cards get ripped up. You can have you play once in the sense that a campaign can be 15 or 20 individual sessions of the game, so it's not like you're getting your money's worth for sure, because like it's actually like when you think about it, you don't play board games
that often, or especially a single one. But it's also like a concept of a spoiler is really important, because in Pandemic, a lot of things happen, because ultimately you start out like, oh, I'm just flying around the world and curing diseases, and then it takes place over months, and by the first couple of months it throws out like half of that out the window, and you're dealing with so many different things.
Have you played Pandemic, Alexander?
I mean, I've played the original game, Pandemic.
So imagine that, but all of a sudden it says, after month 3, open this envelope. And in the envelope is instructions on, okay, well, now you can't do this, or now this is harder to do, or now you have to do this.
This disease is different now.
This disease now operates differently. Or every time you have an outbreak, X happens.
So a thing I can explain that is like in the rule book to start with is every time you have an outbreak in a city, the panic level of that city raises, and if it gets too high, you can't drive into it. You only fly, and then if it gets higher, you can't like build a research station there, that sort of stuff. And that applies for the rest of this board, basically. So from that point on, the world has changed.
There's no full reset at the end in the middle of a legacy game.
So do you think this concept is going to become more prevalent in board games?
It already has.
It has been. So it started with Risk Legacy, and it like everyone was just like, oh my god, this is a brilliant idea. And they have already, so it's Risk, Pandemic, Seafall. I didn't know Gloomhaven was one. I think there's a
Betrayal's coming. 13. So have you played Betrayal at House on the Hill, Alexander? Neither of you have played it?
Neither.
Okay, so Betrayal at House on the Hill is essentially a B-movie horror game where everybody takes someone, they're in this mansion, and it's tile based, so every time you go into a new room you pull a tile off one of the stacks and you put it down, and then there's a symbol, and you either draw one of the cards, and eventually someone becomes a traitor. There's a roll called the haunt roll, and when you fail the haunt roll, and it gets harder every time you pull one of these cards, every time you get one of these icons, you read from the book, and it tells you exactly what scenario is going to happen. It's based on the items that you have and who pulled it, and who failed the roll and all that stuff. Betrayal at House on the Hill Legacy is supposed to take the same family of 13 generations of this family, and the game changes like every time. So there's this ripple effect that happens. So I can't wait for that one. But Gloomhaven's cool.
By the way, Nick, I don't know if you listened to last week's episode, but
I did.
We joked about how Futter was going to start his board game podcast.
Oh no, don't worry, I'll be on it. If it starts. I'm just gonna call that shot now.
So
Pandemic Legacy. This is not a board game podcast. We're done here, Futter. We're moving.
Yeah, one last moment. So this is season 1. There just came out with season 2 of Pandemic Legacy, which takes the end state of the previous season and then extrapolates. And I'm not gonna say anything about it, but I've seen like the back of the box. It looks crazy. It's basically unrecognizable as a Pandemic game. So I'm very excited. Our group will very, very certainly get it.
Fascinating. Are there if someone wants to watch this, are there any particular YouTubers who do this type of stuff that are interesting?
Sit Down, Shut Up, which is Matt Lee's.
Shut Up and Sit Down I don't think they've done like a full playthrough of like the entire campaign, which you wouldn't want to do because it's like a narrative spoilers. So I'm sure you can find people that will have played through all of it, but if some
people like me, Nick, don't have friends who can.
You can play with 2. I think
shouldn't have moved to the UK. I would recommend Shut Up and Sit Down. They're very smart, very eloquent,
and you know Matt Lee's, right?
Reviewers.
Yeah, I do. I actually saw him at PAX Unplugged because he was there with Shut Up, Sit Down.
So Futter, take us into our next game.
It's me. What do I do next? What Remains of Edith Finch?
So this is part of the whole Annapurna thing. So Annapurna is a publisher who is publishing some really interesting stuff right now.
Gorogoa is their latest.
Yeah.
Is that them too? Interesting.
Yeah. And they were
Gorogoa.
Yeah, and they're quietly funding some stuff that is out there. It's happening. I don't know if it's announced yet. But they're doing interesting things right now. And
interesting things.
Yeah. So What Remains of Edith Finch was definitely their big highlight of the year. So talk about that a little bit.
So, there's a narrator, and you're trying to understand. You don't really have a full sense of what's going on, other than this family has had a lot of tragedy in it. But the way it portrays that tragedy is through exploring this old home and then reliving some of the stories of the family members. But they always take a fantastical bent. And the one thing I really loved about the game is it left me asking, is this a game that does have Lovecraftian elements? Like, is this meant to be a Lovecraftian themed game, or is this a poetic interpretation of the tragedy this family has faced? And I can see the arguments for both. Like, is this family actually cursed, or is it just a lot of bad luck that has befallen this family? And again, I absolutely won't spoil this, but there are moments right at the end of the game that are some of the most impactful narrative. One of the most impactful narrative moments I've experienced in a video game. And I would say it has that same. If you enjoyed Gone Home, for instance, and especially as that game started to build towards its conclusion, you didn't know what you were going to find at the end, because I know there were a lot of theories. It's that same build-up. You don't know exactly what's going to happen quite at the end, like what you're going to find behind that door, because there were a lot of theories about that. It's that similar thing. It left me with enough questions and enough. There was that emotional impact about this family's tragedy, and it's like you see how things could have gone better, how things could have had a more positive. Things could have worked out better for members of this family. But it was just whether supernatural tragedy or straight up bad luck. This family has a dark history.
When did it come out?
I would recommend earlier this year.
Okay. Because I feel like I've been hearing about it for a long time, but I might have just been hearing pre-release stuff.
Yeah, I want to say we played it over the summer. Let me just see.
No, you're not doing that. No. We don't have time for that, Futter. We're not doing that.
I'm sticking my tongue out at you now.
So while Futter looks that up, I'm going to take a moment here to read off some of the reader mail top games of the year. So this one comes to us from Johnny T. He said Cuphead. This game combines amazing and addictive gameplay with a unique and fully realized art style. Then he also tossed in Horizon Zero Dawn, which we already talked about. Guerrilla Games created such a brilliant world that I love to explore for hours on end. And then his last one was Super Mario Odyssey. Campaign was awesome, but the post game, just like Nick said, had one of the most addictive loops I've experienced in video games. Credit to Nintendo's masterful understanding of level design. This one comes to us from Zach. His were Persona 5, which may be coming up later on, possibly. I don't know yet. Finding Paradise. I know nothing about that. Do either of you?
I've heard of that either.
And then Rakuen? Rakuen?
Oh. Finding Paradise is the game. I actually was just looking at it. Popped up on my Steam queue. Essentially, it's these doctors who help people like relive their lives, or live their best lives, and then at the end of them, they actually die. Like it's like some kind. Yeah, I don't know anything more about it. The premise is really cool.
Huh. So yeah, Mike, did you find that date for us?
I did. It's April 25th. It came out. So
oh wow, so it was early in the
spring.
Year.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna go into my next one. My next game is Battle Chef Brigade.
That's my last one on my list.
Is it? Oh, you're done? You're out?
I'm done. I'm out.
So give us your 5 again, or how many you had?
I think I had 2 overlaps. I had Miitopia, Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, What Remains of Edith Finch, Super Mario Odyssey was one of mine, and Battle Chef Brigade.
Cool. So Battle Chef Brigade from Trinket. I talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show, but it is essentially a Japanese Coliseum kitchen competition game mixed with Pokemon hunting for ingredients, and then bringing those ingredients back to the kitchen Coliseum, cooking those ingredients using a matching gem style game.
Yeah, and it's a shame they didn't go with Gotta Cook 'Em All.
Gotta cook them all. I'm sure they would have gotten sued for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would have been a letter. But yes, it's so charming, and it seems to be well, no, I do have Horizon Zero Dawn on here. A theme that you'll notice in my last game, and the ones prior, is fun seems to have been a necessary aspect of my games this year. Joy and color. So Battle Chef Brigade, even though there is conflict in it, because conflict creates drama, that conflict is dealt with in a very kind sort of way, a really joyful way, which is not typical or common in a post Game of Thrones fantasy world.
We're going to settle our disputes by cooking. Okay.
Right. Like, and that's the thing, is like everything's settled through cooking. And once you play the game and you see the layers in there of like how these people resolve their difference, like, or, you know, resolve their problems with cooking, it gets weird. Like you start to, you like, I ended up talking to some of the folks on the team just because I was like, how deep does this go? Because everything that world is solved by cooking, and they allude to a bunch of other groups in the game, but it's not explored in that game. So hopefully they get to go back and explore all of that a lot more. But Battle Chef Brigade, full of joy, really great story, a lot of fun.
Perfect portable game on the Switch.
Oh yeah, and I played it on Switch, and it was fantastic on the Switch. Like it is the perfect game for flights and commutes, because it does have a very specific core loop that goes along with it.
And those matches are what, 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer as you go on.
Yeah, and they have the daily, you know, and they have the daily stuff as well. So there's plenty to chew on in Battle Chef Brigade. Nick,
can I just take 1 second, because I'm out, just to shout out to Nintendo and the Switch. Just the fact that the rallying cry from March forward was, "Can I get it on Switch?" is just a testament to how powerful a system the Switch has become. So just huge shout out to Nintendo for just getting it right, almost entirely, with a couple of things I'd love to see fixed on the system.
I mean, I've been incredibly happy with my Switch, which is not something I've said about any of my Nintendo products for over 10 years.
Yeah, it was the
15?
first Nintendo thing I've bought probably since like the 64, and I didn't buy that. You know, I was gifted it for Christmas or something. Like
the last one I can really remember playing was the GameCube, and so that's almost 15 years ago now.
Yeah,
but the Switch is legit.
The interesting thing, from GameCube to Wii U, if you looked at, because I know a lot of game sites used to do which version's best, and they used to stack up the PS2, the Xbox, and the GameCube, right? No one was always saying like GameCube, unless you want X, is not the place to play this game. Then Wii, of course, with Waggle, and then the Wii U with its own problems. But now people are saying, well, I'll give up frame rate, I'll give up visual fidelity, because the Switch's play modalities just fit my life, and I will take this game on the go, understanding what I'm giving up versus PC or versus
we're at
PS4
the point too
Xbox.
Where like both are the wider acceptance of a game doesn't have to look photoreal is like totally fine, and computer processors that would fit on a Switch can still do like pretty good stuff. That convergence is like, yeah, I mean, anything on it looks great. Like Zelda looks absolutely incredible, and Mario as well. And they don't, they can work it so that it takes advantage of the limited hardware, and still looks good. And everyone is like, oh yeah, this looks great, and not like this looks like a stupid cartoon.
Nick, go ahead with your next game.
Yeah. So my next game is Opus Magnum, which I talked about a month ago whenever I was last on the podcast. Have either of you played it since my glowing recommendation?
I continue to see GIFs.
Yes.
Yeah. I think are you the one who's been posting all those GIFs in my timeline, by the way, Nick?
I posted a handful, not very many actually, but more people have posted them. So to quickly recap what it is a Zachtronics genre of game at this point, wherein it's ostensibly a puzzle situation. In Opus Magnum, you are an alchemist in a I don't even know how to classify it, in like an alternative London type of thing. And you have a hex grid in front of you and a series of tools, and then like an instruction timeline. And each tool, which is like an arm that can rotate, or a little wheel or a piston, gets a series of instructions, and then you get an input and an output. And the input can be like lead, and then the output is, gold. And then you grab these little marbles of these alchemical like ingredients, you manipulate them, and then you spit out the output. But the trick is you have to set up your machine such that it can be repeated a dozen times before it passes the puzzle. So it has to repeat correctly and not collide with itself. And like the first puzzle is literally lead into gold, which is great and also extremely easy to do. And then by the end of the very good and well-written story, you are like disassembling these huge crystals, transforming them, and then recombining them into other like massive, complicated like molecule levels of complexity. I think it's the best. So like the Zectronics type of game has existed in a couple forms. Like this similar type of structure has existed in a couple forms. I think this is by far the best realization of that. And they've always had these little story threads, like in between the puzzle, you get like a little conversation, and you start out like this, plucky top of your class at the alchemist school type of guy. And you go work for these house, and there's all this intrigue. And then by the end of it, you've like, you've broken the law, and all this other stuff has happened. And so the story is really good, like very well written. The characters are simple, but for a little minute or two vignette in between the puzzles, by the end of it, I probably would have stopped playing if not for the story. I'll say that, because at some point the puzzles get extremely hard. And I just like, well, I have to see what's going to happen, basically. And then, to be fair, once the story was over, there are like challenge puzzles, and I looked at them once, and I was like, well, this is never going to happen. Because the best part of it, really, and then so talking about the gifts that keep showing up, the games always lent themselves to these gifts because they repeat, and so you could share like, oh, this is how I solved my puzzle, because these puzzles do not have a prescripted solution. It is always like, oh, how fast can you do it, or how few parts can you do it with? And so this Opus Magnum has just a GIF button straight in it, and it will just shoot out a little GIF with like the title of the puzzle and all the stats with it. So a lot of the fun comes in and goes like, okay, I have solved it, that's fine, how can I go back and either lower the cost or the speed or that sort of stuff, or really just like make it pretty, because like it has this kind of machine like quality where every little thing intersects beautifully, and like all this stuff happens just in time to create this like nice looking product. And so that's why a lot of people have seen it but probably not played it, because it's very easy to share your work with it. And then once you play it and you come across a really well-made puzzle, you can appreciate how well-made it is to solve, because you've solved that same design.
And what platforms is it for?
It's on PC or desktop only.
Yeah, it's not on iOS yet, although I feel
it would probably
like
work. Yeah, it would probably work for sure. It's this very drag and drop, a very drag and drop interface. But yeah, it was great. I just like blew through it as fast as I could.
So since I only have one more, I'm going to go through a couple more from the listeners. Mike S-D sent us Zelda Breath of the Wild, because at every point it had me taking my Zelda expectations and tossing them out the window. Then he had Night in the Woods. This game did an incredible job of portraying mental health issues, dying towns, and unfortunate economic situations. And holy boop, the soundtrack is amazing.
I have not gotten to play it yet, but it's been, I've wanted to for forever. It probably would have been on my list if I had played it, which is a shame.
And then he says, this one's kind of cheating since I think it's technically available in some form in 2016, but Overland by Finji. has been a huge part of my gaming habits this year. A mix
I
of
don't think
Oregon
that's even
Trail
out yet.
and
Yeah, it's not out yet.
Technically, I mean, it's been out in a sense that you could pay money and receive it, but yeah. So they're cheating in two ways.
It's
a
not
2016 game that's not even out.
Yeah, like I was just looking at it because it's on my Steam wish list because I want to know when it comes out.
It does look very good.
Yeah,
played bits and
Finji's
pieces.
doing some great stuff, man.
Yeah, that Night in the Woods is also a Finji published game, not produced.
And then also longtime writer in Andre says Darkwood. I've wanted to play non-linear atmospheric open world horror game for more than 10 years, and Darkwood definitely delivers on that front. It also has an amazing world, sound design, and atmosphere. Then Resident Evil 7. This is probably one of the most immersive games I've ever played. Andre really likes his horror movie games. Graphics is never important. And it's funny because he's mentioned that before in the letters he writes into the show, but now that I'm looking at his top 3 games, it's like, oh, wait. Theme. Resident Evil definitely would lose a lot of its appeal without the graphics. Gameplay of Resident Evil 7 is also really enjoyable, and unlike most other horror games, it does provide a good sense of agency and freedom. And then finally, The Forest. I like non-linearity. I like open world. I like horror. I like co-op. And The Forest has it all. Game is still in early access, but even in its current stage, it's a worthwhile co-op survival experience. And then I'm going to toss this one in here too. From Jeff, Fortnite Battle Royale. Sure, it's the AAA fad of the day, but this does what H1Z1 and PUBG couldn't. Enjoyable, smooth gameplay whose devs listen to bugs and request. This is the Team Fortress 2 of the late 10s, the game Valve would make if it was still making games. Love you, Valve. Ukulele. The shade. Ukulele, most enjoyable 3D platformer for fans of Banjo-Kazooie. Not perfect, but it has good music. Monument Valley 2, notable as a quality game in the swamp of mobile games. Hey, we added to that swamp of mobile games this year.
Subsurface Circular out on iPad now, $5.99, I think. is
good
not
stuff.
A swamp. Yeah.
If it wouldn't have seemed self-serving, might have even been on my list because I really, really loved it.
Aww.
But it would have been super self-serving.
Super self-serving. So anyway, Monument Valley 2, it's beautiful and uncluttered, and that was from Jeff. So the last one on my list is Mario and Rabbids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I want that game on everyone's list this year. I want it everywhere because
I didn't play enough of it to get it onto my list.
I haven't played it at all yet.
Neither of you.
I've played some of it, but I haven't played enough of it.
I need to play it. It's just
It's XCOM for the rest of us. Like, that's really what it is. It is everything that makes XCOM great, but packaged in such an accessible way. And I know accessible is a dirty word. And everyone should get good, but I
talked about this
it.
last week. We talked about accessible last week.
XCOM hasn't aged terribly well. I went back and played it because I was like, I need a hit of XCOM, and I was like, oh yeah, some of this is not too solid, especially like looking at Mario and like, oh wow, this looks great.
Yeah,
I will tell you that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The thing that jumped out at me, even playing the bit of Mario and Rabbids that I did, is the believability of Mario with that blaster. Like, the fact that Ubisoft was able to pitch Nintendo and say, okay, look, Mario with guns. Wait, stop! Don't throw us out of the room. But
I love the. Oh, go ahead.
When Mario is crouching behind cover, and like waiting for his turn to come up, like it's just so well designed that it's like, holy crap, this is like totally believable. Like Mario like waiting behind cover to like pop out and blast somebody. It just looks good. And it's one of those things that if they hadn't done it well, if they hadn't really thought it through, would have been so jarring, given everything that Nintendo has done to build up Mario and even all the different directions Mario has gone. It's just, from a design perspective, it just fits.
And the fact that the Mario and Rabbids, I believe they exist in the same world now. Like, I don't know if I can go back and not think of them as existing in the same dimension. Not to mention that Rabbid Peach, easily
character
one
of the year.
Best. Like
Character
one
of the year.
the best characters. Pitch. She's hilarious. The whole selfie thing, and then her shade for Princess Peach herself is fantastic. But yes, Mario and Rabbids, it is XCOM for everyone. It is the thing that if you've always looked at XCOM or you've even tried XCOM and it just didn't stick because it was too difficult or it just wasn't like working, give Mario and Rabbids a try, because that is the game that is going to influence that genre for years, maybe forever. I don't know, but it is definitely a twist and something that can't be ignored from this point going forward.
It's kind of amazing too when I think because it leaked or something, and everyone was like Mario and Rabbids, and you didn't know what it was at all. You're like, okay, well, this is just gonna slide right into the garbage then. And then it's like, and it's XCOM, and then everyone turned and was like, oh, and then it's like, and it's actually incredibly good. That transition was very interesting to watch, and everyone's kind of collective view of that game.
So, Nick, you're the only one with games left, so go ahead.
My last one is Divinity Original Sin 2, an incredible game. Futter, have you played it?
I haven't played 2. Amanda and I started to play 1 co-op, a game I'd love to get back to. Just everything you can do in that game in the first one makes me happy. Like, oh, somebody is standing on oil, like, oh, I'm gonna like rain down fire on them, and it's just gonna hit them there, and then it's gonna light the oil, and it's gonna go hit another guy, or like all those combining of, like, if you can think it, you can probably do it in that game. And
if you can dream it, you can
physics
be it.
Interactions.
Yes, I've played. I'm just gonna say Divinity 2, even though that's not correct. Co-op all the way through. No, I'm sorry, we haven't finished it. All of my time with it has been co-op. I think we're 40 hours in, and it is just the best like RPG, like computer RPG, probably that I have played for sure, and up there. Like, I've seen people that have played like every one of all the old ones, and they speak incredibly highly of it. The voice acting is incredible. The writing is incredible. I think every line of dialogue is voice acted either by the narrator or the character. There are all these little side characters that are just a treat. It's very beautiful. Once you start playing it, all those environment interactions and the spell interactions are really, really cool, because it's all based on status effects. And so surfaces can have a status which is like oil and oil, blood, ice, water, fire, all the standard like fantasy ones. And then all the people can have a status effect which is like blinded or crippled or on fire, etc., etc. And once you start combining them and you see like how your party will interact with each other, you get like your kind of playbook for your party. And then each enemy has like a resistance, like, oh, they have a 200% resistance to fire, which means they get healed from fire. It's like, okay, well, we have to be really careful we don't accidentally set them on fire, because it's really easy to set people on fire when your sword does fire damage and they're standing in oil, so they catch on fire. And then you've played so long and you just hadn't quite encountered that poison will catch on fire. So like all of a sudden, like the entire room just explodes because poison is explosive. And then you fight a certain type of enemy, and when they bleed, they like curse the surface that they're standing in. Oh shit, all of a sudden you're standing in cursed blood, and cursed blood has a very specific, like, it's like, so blood, I don't think blood does anything by itself, but cursed blood I think drains your health or whatever. And it's just incredible. And
plus
like
there's
the
that multiplayer mode.
Like co-op, or are you talking about something else?
No, I'm talking about the versus mode. They kind of created a
like a battle arena type of thing?
Yeah. So you build your party out.
Yeah.
That's just, I demoed it at PAX, at one PAX, I think it was a PAX East. And they set you up, it's like you've got like 4 characters and they've got 4 characters, and it's
that's
like
cool.
You're trying to get treasure and get loot, and which might have potions, and it's like it's a battle to the death, but it's done in a very D&D style.
But Nick, you've been playing it co-op, right?
Yes, all co-op. We've been playing all online, and so the way that works is you basically kind of assign a character to each person.
That's bananas.
And
it's still bananas.
It's so good. So the co-op is great because you get your own inventories. You can control your players as you would just your own game, and then you just link up and start doing your own thing. What else?
The dialogue stuff where you have to vote and like
I don't
you
think
kind of you react. The first one had this, like you could react like, so the way if you're playing multiplayer and there's a dialogue option that comes up, you can choose to react like, I want to take this person with me, and the other person cannot take this person with me, and then there's like a coin flip or some kind of roll. You roll against each other to figure out.
That's not in the second one. I didn't play the first one co-op. Yeah, so in the second one, whoever starts the conversation just has full control of it, and then you can always listen into a conversation. And there's so many little things. Like at some point, like, oh shoot, like I got to an area that only like my character could get to because of flying or teleportation. And it's like, how do we get this? Like, oh right, light bulb goes off. I have a teleportation pyramid in my inventory, so it will teleport to the matching pyramid which the other person has. So you just it feels like you're breaking it at some point with like the workarounds. I can't remember. There was something else I was going to say. Anyway, it's been an absolute joy from start to finish.
Are you finished or are you still going?
No, we're in the second major area, which I believe is the second of 3 major areas. But no,
I hear 100 hours deep at this point.
It's like an 80-hour game, yeah, and we're at 39 or 40. But every time we play, we're just like, this is so much fun. And co-op is again makes playing with someone that you enjoy spending time with that much better.
So as we wrap up things here, I've got Jonathan Downin, our producer's list. He says Zelda Breath of the Wild, Skyrim on Switch, after dabbling in the PC mods and finding myself not playing the game, just modding endlessly. No Man's Sky, which is last year, Rock Band 4, Binding of Isaac, second year in a row. So yeah, he's got a couple titles from last year.
That's fine.
So to wrap things up here, Futter, give us your games again.
My games were Super Mario Odyssey, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Miitopia, What Remains of Edith Finch, and Battle Chef Brigade.
And Nick, what were yours?
Zelda Breath of the Wild, Tacoma, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, Opus Magnum, and Divinity Original Sin 2.
And mine were Horizon Zero Dawn, Super Mario Odyssey, Battle Chef Brigade, Mario and Rabbids. So that's it. If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@bithlagames.com. That's contact@bithlagames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell, @Slawinski, @Futterish. And Nick, what's yours again? It's like there's a thing in there somewhere.
No, there's not. It's just Nic Tringali, but it's spelled NICTRINGALI.
Cool. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. And a shout out again. Welcome, new Spotify listeners. Thanks, and hope you're enjoying the show.
I hope this is your first episode without Mike Bithell, the title person of the podcast and company. This
is weird. It's weird, right? It's a weird one. We're gonna let him. We'll get him in here. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downin. We'll be back in the new year. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last words. Your list, Mike.